So we're going to do a power steering gearbox on my truck because it's got just a crap load of play here in this bottom bearing, and I get pretty good buys on these things anyway, so I'm just going to throw a new one in. When you look at this thing, you can see that it's splined 4 ways on your pitman arm for the output shaft of this power steering gearbox. And then when you look at the input shaft, you can see that there's a slot across the top. So there's not a lot of risk or problem in getting everything situated back the way it used to be onto this alignment wise, other than, you know, there might be some differences inside of that, so we may have to align. But mostly you just want to make sure your clock spring and stuff stays right on your steering wheel. So get it lined up straight. It's a good place to start from. That way you know for reference if you're close or not when you're putting it together. You just need to get it close. Most of the job's going to be done from right here under the front of it. So get rid of your splash guard if you have one. The first thing you do, there's a bolt that goes up into here for the input shaft. It's a 13mm or 1/2 inch, and you just need to get that off. It'll look something like this. I just use a little stubby ratchet with a flexible end shaft on it. That's a good way to get that out. Pull the cotter pin on your pitman arm to your inner tie rod end, and then get a pry bar, and you take your pry bar and you stick it up under behind and just kind of work your shaft off from the input shaft, and just work that. It'll collapse up inside. It might be a little, it's got a telescoping, you know, over under kind of a thing. So you just work that back and get it off like that, and just set that aside. Just make sure that you don't spin that or mess up your steering wheel position as far as your you know what I'm talking about. But see how it's just flat across the top there? So you don't have to worry about fine movements, just gross, you know, massive movements of, you know, multiple rotations or whatever. So I've got that off. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off, you don't have to pull any of this off necessarily here, because you can do that when it's off. I like to do it when it's here anyway, and just leave this intact, so I actually don't got to pull the pin the way I'm going to do it this time. It's easier to just use a pitman arm puller and disconnect it this way than to have to bang on this using the tie rod end trick, because sometimes with this not being secured to anything it can be kind of tough. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this one off next, and then I'll pull my lines off. I've got the pressure line right here and the return line here, and you can leave the nipple in it and just undo the clamp on it. This one's never been done before, so I'll just yank that off and replace it with a screwdriver type hose clamp. And so I just basically need to get this off and the clamp off, and I'll have those lines free. This is a 34mm, and these out here are 21mm, and then I'll have the steering gear out. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply our, I've pulled the nut off, is all I did since the last thing, and set that aside. Next thing you want to do is get yourself a pitman arm puller. You can rent one from AutoZone. They're part number 27016. And you don't want to try doing this without one, because you'll really jack stuff up for the next guy that gets the rebuilt model that you mutilated. So you just, I don't know if you saw that, but you just start sideways. You go onto the pitman arm and slide it down between. If you got a Chevy or something with a big heavy bushing or something in there, you can shove it back up into the steering gearbox. But you can see it's got a little point to it. That point goes up into the output shaft of the steering gearbox, like this. And then you want a 3/4 inch or 19mm. I like to get mine to twist the way that the bolt's going to twist. If you can spray your threads with WD-40 before you begin, that'll help things to go smoothly. Or just whatever oil you like. So you can also plug into this directly with a 3/8 drive ratchet. If you have an impact gun, then you want to use the 19mm. So go ahead and get these to queue up. And this won't go. Wear eye protection when you're doing this, huh? Because if these pop or explode out, they can really jack up your facial. And make sure that you're in the tightened direction. It's hard when you're holding the camera and doing all this at the same time. What I should do is set the camera down, start this threaded by hand. There we go. Tighten direction. Like I say, it won't go, and then just snap, and it'll just go fast. Put a little dab of grease on the bottom of that. That helps too. I forgot to do that. It's about to go. So anyway, this way I don't have to interrupt that or bang on it or do anything. I just barely replace that. I've been going through this whole thing, converting it over to Moog Problem Solver components, because I like those a lot better than what's the worn out factory stuff or whatever has been put on it since. So that's how you use a pitman arm puller, and that's just the way to go. Seriously, so much easier. When you go to put this on to the new one, it's no big deal. You just stick it up on there, stick your nut on there, and torque it to spec. So next thing we're going to do is we've got our drain pan all ready to go here. Got my flare crow's foot wrenches for doing the lines. And we'll get that pressure line off and return line off and just let them start bleeding and peeing everywhere. And then once all that's done, nothing else will be holding this. It's just stuck to the frame, and it's just those 3 bolts right there. Zip, zip, zip. So it works out to be 18 millimeter on that line. So what I do is I use a flex head and a little 1-inch extension, and you just got to break it free with your crow's foot line wrench like this. See, that's why I can fit it between the lines and just work it any way I want. I got options. So make sure you get your drain pan staged underneath it there, and I'll pop out the extension and the ratchet. I'll set them aside, and then I'll just leave the crow's foot on. I'll spin it around as much as I can. I can't go all the way around and around with it on account of there's that return line in the way, but I'll use it as long as I need to. This is what they look like. That's what the rest of my setup looks like. It's a Craftsman flex wrench. These are awesome. You get tons of leverage with all that length, but you can control, you know, where you have it go. Just with the flex, because it's too long to fit into most places, but with that ability to flex, you've got leverage and you've got access. It's just gorgeous. So there went my pressure line. Watch for your O-rings if they have O-rings on them. A lot of times they do. And the next thing, I'll just need to get a long screwdriver and a hammer, and I'll hack that hose clamp off. It's the pincher type. Quit talking and make sure that my drain pan's catching. I used to be an adventurer like you, but then I took a winch to the knee. A little inside computer YouTube joke. So next thing, I've got the thing all out and situated. I've broken this loose so I can do it with my eyes closed, one hand behind my back over the top to keep the dirt out. Let's leave this on there till I get mine in place, and then once it's bolted to the frame, then I'll start putting the lines on, and then eventually the other stuff. So that's all ready to go. I've got my old one out. See all the crud in there? That's what I don't want to have happen to the new one. So everything else is just honky hangy dory. Watch your head. This thing can really be a beast if you're not used to it being there. So there's my lines. I'm going to rag that off before I start anything else. Put the new O-rings on that come with the power steering gear. I already did the other one for the inlet or return, sorry. Anyway, yippee-ki-yay. So once you got your power steering gear back up in there, then you want to stick a funnel in your little fluid well. Wow! for splash. And then raise the front axle and then turn it back and forth. Go ahead, Tyson. When you turn it back and forth, what you'll find is that it'll bubble up all the bubbles and the fluid level will go down gradually. As you see there. Keep turning it. See how it's just kind of bubbling out? And it's good to do this before starting the vehicle, and the reason for that is that you only have one speed with the power steering pump, kind of. More or less just like as fast as the engine's turning. It'll whip it and make it frothy and get a bunch of air and suspension in the fluid. And while that sounds awesome because it has the word suspension in it and fluid, it's not, because it'll make your power steering system whine and moan and, you know, be crappy. And whereas this has power brakes are operated on the power steering fluid, you don't want that to be full of air too. So that's why we're doing what we're doing, because we're so smart, me and Tyson over here. The kid's a genius. It's all his idea. So anyway, then after you've done this for a little bit and you've topped off the fluid, then start it up and let it run at idle for a little bit, and then the remainder of any air in the system will purge itself to the little fluid tank on your power steering pump. Hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, be sure to click thumbs up, like button. If you want to see more videos like this, click the subscribe button. It's up above. It's kind of fun to click. And thanks for watching. Cheers.